My mother didn't pay her debt with money. She paid it with me. At 19, I was forced to marry a man I barely knew, Elias Thorne, powerful, dangerous, and holding secrets that could destroy us both. I thought I was his prisoner, but years later, I came back with power of my own. And this time, I plan to have the last word. Before we continue, don't forget to like, comment and subscribe for more stories like this. Jessica Grand never thought the sound of footsteps could make her stomach turn. But tonight, they did. The slow, deliberate rhythm of her mother's heels on the hallway floor grew louder, heavier, as if each step was dragging something behind it, something she didn't want Jessica to see. Jessica sat at the kitchen table, her homework spread out in front of her but completely forgotten. The dim yellow light above flickered slightly, casting shadows across the peeling wallpaper. She could smell the faint scent of rain from outside. And something else. Her mother's perfume, mixed with the sharp bite of cigarette smoke. When Lydia finally stepped into the kitchen, her face was pale but her lipstick was perfect. She set her handbag down slowly, carefully, like someone laying a fragile object on a ledge. Jessica knew that look. It was the look her mother wore when she'd lost a bet at the poker table or when the electricity bill had doubled. Jessica, Lydia began, her voice low. We need to talk. Jessica closed her notebook. Is this about the bills again? I told you, I can get a part-time job. It's not about the bills. Lydia pulled out a chair and sat opposite her, leaning forward so her eyes caught Jessica's. It's worse than that. Jessica's heart skipped. What do you mean worse? Lydia didn't answer right away. She reached into her bag and pulled out a folded piece of paper. When she placed it on the table, Jessica could see the sharp black ink of numbers, a total so large her breath caught. That's a lot, Jessica whispered. It's a debt, Lydia said. Her voice trembled, though she tried to hide it. It's mine. I owe Elias Thorne. Jessica frowned. She'd heard the name before, whispered in the market, mentioned on late-night news stories about business tycoons and powerful men who never smiled. Why do you owe him money? Lydia's hands tightened around her coffee cup. I borrowed it. Years ago. For the house. For other things. It grew with interest, faster than I could pay. And now? And now what? Jessica's voice sharpened. Lydia's eyes flickered to the clock, then back to Jessica. And now he's coming here. Jessica blinked. Here? Why? Before Lydia could answer, the sound of a car engine hummed from outside. The rumble grew louder, then stopped. Headlights flashed briefly across the curtains. Jessica's pulse raced. She stood up, moving toward the window, but Lydia's hand shot out, gripping her wrist. Don't, she said. Jessica turned to her. Why not? Because, this isn't a meeting you want to start by questioning him. Before Jessica could demand more, there was a knock, 3 steady knocks, at the door. Lydia stood, smoothing her dress, her hands shaking slightly. She went to answer it. The man who stepped inside looked exactly how Jessica imagined Elias Thorne would, tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than their car. His hair was dark, neatly combed, and his eyes, cold gray, moved over Jessica with a calculating calm, as though he were assessing an object, not a person. Mr. Thorne, Lydia greeted softly. Mrs. Grand. His voice was smooth but carried the weight of someone used to being obeyed. He looked at Jessica. And this must be your daughter. Jessica crossed her arms. You can say my name, you know. I'm not invisible. A flicker of something, amusement, passed through his eyes. Jessica. Lydia moved quickly, motioning toward the table. Please, sit. We should talk. They did. But it wasn't really talking. Lydia explained, haltingly, how she couldn't pay the debt, how she tried to sell the car, the jewelry, even the antique clock her grandmother left her. Elias listened without interrupting, his expression unreadable. When she finished, he leaned back. I gave you 5 years, Lydia. That was generous. The deadline has passed. I know, Lydia whispered. I know. But I can't give you money I don't have. Jessica glanced between them, tension building in her chest. So what happens now? Are you going to take the house? Elias's gaze shifted to her, steady and sharp. No. I'm going to take something more valuable. Jessica's skin prickled. What's that supposed to mean? He didn't answer her directly. Instead, he turned to Lydia. You offered me another form of payment. Jessica's head whipped toward her mother. What? Lydia's face crumpled. Jess, please. What did you offer him? Jessica's voice shook, louder now. Lydia swallowed hard. I offered you. The world seemed to tilt. Jessica stared at her mother, unable to process the words. You, what? You'll marry him, Lydia said quickly, like ripping off a bandage. It's the only way to clear the debt. His agreed. You'll be safe. You'll have a roof over your head. I don't care about that. Jessica's voice cracked. You can't just sell me to pay off your mistakes. Elias finally spoke again, his tone calm but firm. It's not selling. It's an agreement. You'll live in my home. You'll have everything you need. I don't want anything from you, Jessica spat. He stood then, towering over the table, his presence almost filling the small kitchen. You will, he said quietly. One day. He turned to leave, but paused at the door, glancing back at her. You'll hate me now, Jessica. But one day, you'll understand. The door closed behind him with a soft click. Jessica turned to her mother, her voice barely a whisper. I'll never forgive you. The mansion was nothing like Jessica's small, worn home. It was huge, cold, and perfect, like something out of a magazine, if magazines could smell faintly of expensive cologne and rules. The first night she arrived, the staff greeted her with polite nods but no warmth. They moved silently, their eyes sliding away from hers. It felt like walking into a world where she didn't belong and never would. Elias was nowhere to be seen at first. A maid named Clara led Jessica up a sweeping staircase to a large bedroom. The bed was enormous, the sheets crisp, the view overlooking endless gardens. It should have felt luxurious, but instead, it felt like a cage. Dinner is at 7, Clara said quietly. Mr. Thorne likes punctuality. Jessica sat on the edge of the bed. Does he like conversation? Clara hesitated, then lowered her voice. Only if it's on his terms. Dinner was strange. The long dining table could have seated 20, but only 2 places were set, one at the far end for Elias, and one halfway down for Jessica. They ate in near silence. Jessica pushed the food around on her plate, finally breaking the quiet. Why did you agree to this? You could have taken my mother to court, sold the house. Elias didn't look up. Because I don't want the house. Then what do you want? His eyes finally met hers, steady and unreadable. Control. Jessica's fork clinked against her plate. Of me. Of my life, he corrected. You're part of it now. That's all you need to know. She wanted to argue, to scream, but something in his tone made her bite her tongue. Days passed, and the rules of the mansion became clear. No leaving without permission. No entering the West Wing. No phone calls unless approved. Jessica tested the boundaries early. She tried to walk through the gardens alone one morning, only to have a security guard politely escort her back inside. When she confronted Elias about it later, he simply said, "Security is for your protection." "I don't need protection," she snapped. "Everyone does," he replied, his voice cool. "Some just don't know it yet." Late one night, Jessica woke to the sound of muffled voices. She crept to her door, listening. The sound seemed to be coming from the West Wing, the locked part of the house. A low voice, then a muffled sob. She pressed her ear against the wood. The voices stopped. Silence. Then the faint sound of a door closing. She never heard footsteps walking away. By the end of her first week, Jessica realized the mansion was a place of both luxury and invisible walls. Elias was rarely around during the day, but when he was, he seemed to watch her, not constantly, but enough to make her feel she was never truly alone. One evening, as she reached for a glass in the kitchen, her hand slipped, and the glass shattered on the marble counter. She winced as a shard cut into her palm. Blood welled instantly. Before she could find a towel, Elias appeared. He took her hand without a word, guiding her to sit at the counter. His grip was firm but careful. He cleaned the cut, his touch gentle. "You should be more careful," he said quietly. Jessica met his eyes. "Why do you care?" His gaze lingered on her for a moment before he released her hand. "Because you're mine now. And I take care of what's mine." The word sent a shiver through her, not just from the coldness in his tone, but from the strange, unsettling thought that maybe he meant it. Jessica had been in Elias Thorne's mansion for 2 weeks when she first saw the West Wing up close. It happened late one rainy afternoon. The storm had started suddenly, drumming against the windows and making the hallways feel darker than usual. She'd been exploring the second floor, pretending she was simply walking to stretch her legs, when she noticed the change in the air. The west hallway was different. While the rest of the mansion had warm lighting and polished wood, this part was dimmer, colder. The carpet here was a faded burgundy instead of deep blue, and the windows were covered with heavy curtains that blocked out the rain-streaked daylight. At the very end of the hall, a large oak door stood closed, a brass handle gleaming faintly in the shadows. The only sound was the faint ticking of an old clock on the wall. Jessica stepped closer, heart beating faster. She remembered Clara's warning from her first day here. No one enters the West Wing. She reached out and tried the handle. It didn't move. Locked. But then she heard it, a faint sound from behind the door. Not the creak of the building settling, but something human. A voice. Muffled. Jessica leaned closer, pressing her ear against the wood. It was a man's voice, low and urgent. Then another voice, a woman's, broken, shaking. She couldn't make out the words. The voices stopped suddenly, replaced by silence so heavy it made her skin crawl. Jessica stepped back, feeling a prickle at the base of her neck. She looked down the hallway, half expecting to see Elias watching her. Instead, it was Clara, the maid. Clara's expression was tight, her eyes sharp. "You shouldn't be here, Mrs. Thorne." Jessica hated the title. "Why? What's behind the door?" "That's not for you to ask." Clara's tone was respectful, but there was an edge to it. Jessica crossed her arms. "If I live here, I have a right to know." Clara hesitated, glancing toward the door, then back at Jessica. "Some doors are locked for your safety." Jessica's stomach tightened. That sounds like something Elias would say. Clara didn't answer. She stepped aside, gesturing toward the main hallway. "Come, dinner will be ready soon." That night at dinner, Jessica decided to push. Elias sat at the head of the table, eating slowly, his attention fixed on some file beside his plate. "What's in the West Wing?" she asked suddenly. Elias didn't look up. "Rooms that are off limits." "Why?" He set his fork down, finally meeting her gaze. "Because I said so." Jessica clenched her jaw. "That's not an answer." "It's the only one you're going to get." His voice was calm, but there was steel underneath it. She held his stare, refusing to look away first. "You can lock doors, Elias, but you can't lock my curiosity." For a long moment, they didn't move. Then, almost imperceptibly, a corner of his mouth curved. "We'll see." That night, the storm returned. Jessica woke around midnight to the sound of footsteps. She slipped out of bed and followed them down the hallway, keeping to the shadows. They led her straight to the West Wing door. She stopped just in time to see Elias unlock it and step inside, closing it softly behind him. For a moment, she considered running to push the door open before it shut completely. But something in her told her to wait. She stood in the dark hallway, the sound of the rain against the windows mixing with the faint echo of voices from behind the locked door. She didn't sleep for the rest of the night. The next morning, Jessica was pouring herself coffee when Henry Ashford arrived. Henry was Elias's lawyer, a tall man in his early 40s with kind eyes that seemed out of place in this house. His suit was impeccable, but unlike Elias's cold precision, Henry's appearance had a warmth to it. "Mrs. Thorne," he greeted her politely. Jessica raised an eyebrow. "Do you all rehearse the formality thing, or is it just natural here?" Henry smiled faintly. "Force of habit." Elias came in moments later, shaking Henry's hand before leading him toward the study. Jessica watched them go, her curiosity sparking again. She waited until Clara was distracted with cleaning, then slipped toward the study. The heavy door was slightly ajar, and she pressed herself against the wall, listening. "You're running out of time," Henry was saying. "I'm aware," Elias replied. "You can't keep her in the dark forever." Jessica froze. "Ha! Were they talking about her?" "She's not ready to know," Elias said, his tone sharper now. "It's not about readiness, Elias, it's about the truth." "Lydia." "Leave Lydia out of this." There was a pause. Henry lowered his voice. "She's your wife now. She has a right to know why this debt was really." The door closed suddenly, cutting off the rest of the conversation. Jessica stepped back, her heart racing. Why this debt was really what? That evening, she found Lydia's name swirling in her head. She hadn't spoken to her mother since the day she left. There had been no calls, no visits. The last words between them had been sharp, angry, final. But now, Jessica decided to confront Elias again. He was in the library, reading. She stepped inside, arms crossed. "What happened between you and my mother?" Elias didn't look up. "Many things. Be more specific." "The debt. How did it really start?" He closed the book slowly, his grey eyes settling on her. "Your mother owed me money. That's all you need to know." "That's not what Henry thinks," Jessica shot back. His expression didn't change, but his gaze sharpened. "You've been listening at doors." "I wouldn't have to if you weren't hiding things from me." He stood, stepping closer. "Careful, Jessica. Curiosity can be dangerous." Her pulse quickened, but she didn't step back. "You think you scare me? You're wrong." For a moment, his eyes searched hers, and she thought she saw a flicker of something, regret, maybe? But it was gone almost instantly. "Go to bed," he said quietly. That night, Jessica dreamed of the West Wing again. But this time, she wasn't outside the locked door, she was inside. The hallway was lined with closed doors, each one with a brass plate. She opened one at random and stepped inside. A woman sat in a chair, her back to Jessica. Her dark hair spilled over her shoulders. Jessica reached out to touch her. The woman turned. It wasn't a stranger. It was Jessica. She woke with a start, her sheets tangled around her legs, the echo of the dream clinging to her skin. 2 days later, she found the photograph. She was in the upstairs lounge, browsing through a stack of old books on a side table, when one of them slid open to reveal a folded picture tucked inside. She pulled it out, and froze. It was a photo of a young woman, maybe in her 20s. Dark hair, sharp eyes. She looked so much like Jessica that it was unsettling. But it wasn't her. On the back, in neat handwriting, was a single name, Elena Thorne. Jessica stared at the picture for a long moment before slipping it into her pocket. She didn't know who Elena was. But she was going to find out. The rain had been falling for 3 days straight. Jessica had started counting. The sound of it against the mansion's tall windows became background noise, like the ticking of the old clocks and the hum of distant voices she could never place. But this morning, the mansion was quieter than usual. Too quiet. Jessica stepped into the hallway and noticed something strange. Rose's cleaning cart sat abandoned by the staircase. Rose, the young maid with the gentle laugh and the habit of humming under her breath, was nowhere to be seen. Jessica had last seen her the previous evening, when she'd carried fresh towels into Jessica's room and whispered, almost nervously, "Be careful in this house." Now, she was just gone. Jessica found Clara in the kitchen, chopping herbs. "Where's Rose?" Jessica asked casually. Clara's hands didn't pause, but her jaw tightened slightly. "She resigned." "Resigned? Since last night?" "Yes." Jessica frowned. "Without saying goodbye? She wouldn't even tell me she was leaving." Clara looked up then, her eyes sharp. "Some people leave quickly, Mrs. Thorne. It's safer that way." The words sat between them like a puzzle piece from the wrong box. Later, Jessica found Elias in the study, standing by the tall window, his hands in his pockets. The light from outside cast him in sharp lines, half in shadow, half in pale grey daylight. "Where's Rose?" she asked directly. "Gone," Elias said simply. "Gone where?" He turned slightly, his gaze cool. "It doesn't matter." "It matters to me." "You knew her for 2 weeks," he said, his tone flat. "Don't make it more than it was." Jessica crossed her arms. What happened to her? Elias finally faced her fully. She made a choice. She didn't want to be here anymore. "She didn't seem like she had a choice," Jessica shot back. A muscle in his jaw twitched, but his voice stayed calm. "Some choices are just harder to see." That night, the West Wing was louder. Jessica was sure she heard the sound of someone, being dragged. It was faint, muffled by the thick walls, but it was there. She pressed her ear against her bedroom wall and waited. A door slammed somewhere in the house. Then, silence. The next day, she saw Elias speaking to 2 men she'd never met before. They stood near the front door, their suits dark and their voices low. When they left, one of them glanced at Jessica, his expression unreadable, and then looked away quickly, as though meeting her eyes might cost him something. She found herself wondering if Rose had met them before she left. And if she had, whether she'd left at all. That evening, something unexpected happened. Jessica had been walking down the main hall when she heard voices in the sitting room. She recognized Elias's voice, steady and deep, but the other was unfamiliar, a sharper, impatient tone. "She's not safe here," the other man said. "She's safer here than anywhere else," Elias replied. "Not if they find out she's alive." Jessica froze. The words sent a cold shock through her. Who was she? Was it her? Or Elena, the woman in the photograph? Before she could hear more, Elias stepped out into the hall, his eyes locking onto hers instantly. "You like listening at doors," he said, his voice low. "I like answers," she replied. He stepped closer until they were only a breath apart. "You won't like the answers I have." That night, Jessica didn't sleep. She lay awake, listening to the sound of the rain and wondering if Rose had been the first to disappear, or just the most recent. The opportunity came during the charity event. It was the first time Elias had taken her anywhere outside the mansion since their marriage. The grand ballroom was filled with glittering lights, expensive gowns, and people who smiled too much while their eyes darted toward Elias as if measuring his worth in the space he took up. Jessica wore a sleek black dress chosen for her by Elias's assistant. It fit perfectly, but it felt like a costume. For the first half of the evening, Elias stayed close, introducing her to business partners and politicians, always with that cool, controlled demeanor. But as the speeches began and the music softened, he stepped away to speak with an older man in a corner. Jessica felt the shift immediately, the space, the chance. She moved toward the exit, her heels tapping against the marble floor, her breath quickening. Outside, a long driveway stretched toward the main road. A line of cars waited for valet service. She spotted a side path leading toward the street, lit faintly by garden lamps. She took it. The cold night air bit at her skin as she walked faster, her heart pounding. She was halfway down the path when she heard footsteps behind her. She turned, ready to run, but it wasn't a security guard, it was Elias. He didn't look angry. In fact, he looked almost amused. You're going the wrong way, he said. Jessica's hands curled into fists. I'm going home. This is your home. No. This is your prison. He stepped closer, the gravel crunching under his shoes. If you walk away now, you won't make it far. And even if you do, you'll regret it. You don't know what I'll regret. He studied her for a long moment, then stepped aside. Go ahead, then. See what's out there. Jessica's breath caught. She hadn't expected him to let her go. She brushed past him and kept walking until she reached the main road, her pulse racing. She made it to her mother's old house. But when she got there, the windows were dark. The mailbox was stuffed with unopened letters. The door creaked when she pushed it open, revealing dust on the furniture, cobwebs in the corners. Mom, she called into the silence. No answer. Jessica wandered through the rooms, each one colder than the last. She found the kitchen just as they'd left it months ago, except for one thing. On the table sat a single envelope with her name written in Lydia's handwriting. Her fingers trembled as she opened it. Jessica, if you're reading this, you've left him. Go back. He's the only one who can protect you. Trust me. Don't ask why. Mom. Jessica read it twice, her stomach twisting tighter each time. When she returned to the mansion later that night, Elias was waiting for her in the main hall. Welcome home, he said simply, as if she'd only gone for a walk. Jessica stared at him, the letter burning in her pocket. What do you know about my mother's disappearance? His expression didn't change. Enough to know you should stop looking for her. Why? Because if you find her, you'll wish you hadn't. That night, she lay awake in her bed, clutching the letter, and realized something terrifying. It wasn't just that she didn't trust Elias. It was that she didn't trust her mother anymore, either. The decision came quietly. Jessica didn't slam doors or scream her intentions to the sky. She simply packed a small bag one night and left. Elias didn't follow. He didn't even try to stop her. It almost made her angry. Didn't he care enough to fight for control over me like he always did? But as the taxi pulled away from the mansion's gates, she realized maybe he wanted her to go. Maybe he thought she'd come crawling back, broken. She promised herself she never would. The first few months away were hard. She sold her jewelry, the pieces Elias had given her, not because she needed the money but because she couldn't bear to wear his taste around her neck and wrists. She moved to a small apartment in another city, far enough away that no one recognized her as Mrs. Thorne. For a while, she drifted. Temp jobs. Long nights of staring at the ceiling, wondering where Lydia was. Wondering if Rose was alive. Wondering if Elias had found someone else to fill her place. But drifting only lasted so long. She had always been sharp, quick with numbers, good at spotting the cracks in people's armor. It was a skill Elias had once quietly admired, though he never said it out loud. Jessica started working for a small real estate firm, selling rundown buildings to desperate buyers. It wasn't glamorous, but it taught her something important: how money moved, who held the strings, and how to pull them without anyone noticing. 2 years in, she moved again, this time overseas. She landed a position with Marston International, a company that was in constant rivalry with Thorne Industries. At first, she didn't tell them her last name. She was just Jessica Grand again. But when they eventually found out, it worked in her favor. Being the ex-wife of Elias Thorne gave her an edge. She knew how he thought. She knew how he closed deals, the patterns in his strategies, the kinds of people he trusted, and the kinds he didn't. By her 3rd year abroad, she was no longer just an employee. She was a rising executive. Her office was on the top floor of a skyscraper, with glass walls and a view of the city stretching out like a chessboard. She kept her desk clear except for one object, a small locked box labeled Thorne. Inside were documents, photographs, and names she had collected over the years. Connections. Secrets. Pieces of Elias's empire she could dismantle if she chose. Sometimes she would open the box late at night, pour herself a drink, and imagine the look on his face when she finally made her move. It wasn't just about revenge. It was about taking back the years he had stolen from her. But there were moments, rare, unwanted, when she thought about his eyes in the half-light, the way he had bandaged her hand once without saying a word, or the strange mix of warning and promise in his voice when he told her she'd understand one day. She hated herself for remembering. By the 5th year, Jessica had enough money, power, and influence to do whatever she wanted. She decided it was time. She booked a flight back to the city. She chose her most calculated armor, a midnight blue gown, diamonds at her ears, and the quiet, lethal confidence of a woman who no longer feared the man who had once owned her. The night she returned, Elias Thorne would know she was no longer part of his past. She was his reckoning. The gala was exactly the kind of event Elias loved, formal, exclusive, crawling with people who measured each other in whispered figures and discreet nods. Jessica arrived late, the way one does when they want to be noticed. The room was full of light, the air warm with music and low conversation. Crystal chandeliers threw gold across marble floors. She paused at the entrance, letting her eyes sweep the room. People turned. Some stared openly, some tried not to. She could feel the ripple move through them as recognition set in. The whispers started almost immediately. "Is that? She's back?" "Thorne's wife, no, ex-wife, I heard." She spotted him near the center of the room, speaking with a small group of investors. He looked almost exactly as she remembered, tall, immaculate in a dark suit, his expression composed but alert, like a predator who knows is being watched. When his eyes found hers across the crowd, the conversation around him seemed to fade. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then, slowly, he started walking toward her. "Jessica." His voice was the same, smooth, controlled, but there was something underneath it now. She smiled without warmth. "Elias. You're back. For the night." His gaze traveled over her, assessing, like he was searching for the girl he'd once married and not finding her. "You've changed." "Good," she said. "So have I." A faint smirk tugged at the corner of his mouth. "I doubt you came here for the champagne." "No," she agreed. "I came to see if you'd remember my name." His smirk faded, replaced by something unreadable. "I never forgot." They moved to the side of the room, away from curious ears. The air between them was taut, each word measured. "You've done well for yourself," he said. "Marston International. Bold choice." "It wasn't a choice," she replied. "It was strategy." "Against me." She met his gaze steadily. "Against everything you built." Elias's expression didn't change, but his eyes darkened slightly. "Be careful, Jessica. You're not the only one who can play that game." "I know," she said softly. "That's why I came back." Before he could reply, a man approached, a silver-haired politician Jessica recognized from news reports. He smiled broadly at her, shaking her hand. "Mrs. Thorne." "Miss Grand," she corrected smoothly. The man's smile faltered, but he covered it with polite laughter before turning to Elias. "I see you two have history." "You could say that," Jessica said. Elias didn't take his eyes off her as the man excused himself. "Why are you really here?" he asked. Jessica tilted her head. "To tell you that whatever game you think you're winning, I'm playing it now too. And you think you'll win." "I know I will." The night went on, but the tension between them stayed electric. Every time she caught his eye across the room, it felt like a silent challenge. By the end of the evening, she had spoken to half the room, businessmen, politicians, media figures. And each time she dropped Elias's name, she made sure it was in the context of her new power, not her old role as his wife. As she prepared to leave, Elias appeared beside her, his presence sudden and deliberate. "I've been waiting for you," he said quietly. She met his gaze. "You won't have to wait much longer. The real game starts now." The storm that night felt like the sky itself had decided to tear apart. Jessica sat in the back of the black sedan, watching lightning streak over the city. She had been working toward this night for years. Every deal she had closed, every connection she had built, had brought her here. On the seat beside her lay a black leather folder. Inside were documents, signed statements, photographs, and bank records, proof of Elias's dealings with the shadow group known only as the Syndicate. The same syndicate that had taken her mother. She planned to expose him publicly, stripping away the untouchable power he had wrapped himself in. But part of her wanted something more personal. She wanted to watch him feel it. When she arrived at the Thorne mansion, the gates opened without her even asking. Inside, the house was dim except for the flicker of a fire in the study. She found Elias there, alone, a glass of whiskey in his hand. He didn't look surprised to see her. "You've been busy," he said. "I learned from the best." He raised his glass in a mock salute. "And now you're here to end me." "Not just you," she said, placing the folder on his desk. "The Syndicate, too." He didn't even glance at the folder. "Do you know what happens if you do that?" "Yes. You lose." "And so do you," he said quietly. "And your mother dies." Her pulse spiked. "She's already gone." "No," he said, his gaze locking onto hers. "She's alive. And I've kept her that way for 6 years." Jessica felt the room tilt. "You're lying." "I wish I were," he said, setting down the glass. "The debt your mother owed wasn't money. It was her life. She crossed the Syndicate, took something from them she shouldn't have. The only way to protect her was to give them something they wanted more." "Me," Jessica whispered. "Yes," Elias said. "They wanted leverage. I married you to keep you under my protection. If you walk away, or if you destroy them, they'll collect on your mother." Jessica shook her head, her chest tightening. "You expect me to believe that after everything you've done?" "I don't expect you to believe anything," he said. "I expect you to understand the cost of your revenge." The fire crackled between them. Outside, thunder rolled like a warning. Before she could answer, the lights in the house flickered and went out. Elias moved instantly, pulling her toward the side door. "They're here." "The Syndicate." He didn't answer, but the set of his jaw was enough. They moved through the West Wing, their footsteps silent on the thick rugs. Jessica's mind spun with everything she had just learned. Then, from the darkness ahead, a voice, "Mrs. Thorne." She recognized it. It was one of the men she'd seen years ago, the night Rose disappeared. "You've been busy," the man said, stepping forward. "Your husband's been keeping you all to himself. Time to finish the debt." Elias stepped between them, his voice low. "You're not touching her." But the man smiled. "Not unless you hand over Lydia." Jessica froze. "You have her." "Not for long," the man said. "She's running out of time." The standoff broke in an instant. Elias lunged, knocking the man into the wall. Jessica ran. She didn't know where she was going, only that she had to find her mother before it was too late. She reached the basement door and flung it open. The air was damp, heavy. She descended the steps, the sound of the storm muffled down here. In the far corner, behind a locked gate, sat a small cot. And on it, thin, pale, but breathing, was Lydia. "Mom!" Jessica whispered. Lydia's eyes fluttered open. "Jess, you shouldn't be here." Before Jessica could respond, footsteps pounded down the stairs. Elias appeared, blood on his knuckles, keys in his hand. He unlocked the gate and pulled Lydia up. "We don't have time," he said. "They'll be back with more men." Jessica stared at him. "Why didn't you tell me she was here?" "Because you would have done exactly what you're doing now, risking everything," he said. "Sometimes protecting someone means letting them hate you." They didn't stop running until they reached the old boathouse by the river. Rain hammered the tin roof, the air cold enough to bite. Elias laid Lydia on a bench, covering her with his coat. Jessica stood by the doorway, the black folder still clutched in her hands. Her mind was at war, revenge burning in one corner, the truth Elias had told her in another. "You could have told me years ago," she said, her voice sharp. "And you would have believed me?" he asked. She didn't answer. Lydia stirred. "Jess, don't do this." "Don't do what?" Jessica asked. "Don't destroy the syndicate," Lydia whispered. "If you do, I'm gone." Jessica's throat tightened. "You knew." "I made the deal, not him," Lydia said, glancing at Elias. "He's been paying for my mistake ever since." The folder felt heavier in Jessica's grip. She had the power to end Elias's empire, to cripple the syndicate. But doing so would cost her mother's life. She looked at Elias. "If I let them live, if I walk away, what happens then?" "They'll keep watching you," he said. "But I'll keep them away. Just like I always have. And I'm supposed to trust you." "You don't have to trust me," he said quietly. "You just have to decide who you can live without, me or her." The rain outside slowed to a steady patter. Jessica closed her eyes. For years she had imagined this moment, the moment she won. But winning suddenly felt like losing everything. She walked to the river's edge, the folder in her hands. Elias watched her. "Once you drop it, there's no going back." "I know," she said. And then she let it fall. The folder hit the water and vanished beneath the current. When she turned back, Elias's expression was unreadable. "You had the last word," he said. "No," she replied. "I just changed the ending." By morning, the syndicate was gone from the mansion. Lydia was safe, moved to a quiet house in the countryside under Elias's guard. Jessica didn't return to the mansion. She left the city again, this time with no plan to come back. But she knew one thing: if the syndicate ever came for her family again, she wouldn't hesitate. Because she hadn't forgiven Elias. She had simply chosen her battlefield. And the next time they met, she would be ready. The game between us is far from over, and the next move is hers. If you want to know what she'll do next, and how far she'll go, make sure you subscribe right now. Trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming.